This is a mighty water. It may not look like much, but what happens here on the outskirts of Sturgeon Bay every October is nothing short of a miracle. Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Door. I'm Kevin O'Donnell, and today we are headed to the banks of the diminutive Strawberry Creek.
Good morning, everyone. Chilly morning this morning, frost out. I think it's the first time we've seen frost. 36 degrees when I got up this morning. But it is near the middle of October, and every year at about this time, there's an event that occurs here in Door County that we are going to investigate. We're headed to a place called the Strawberry Creek Salmon Spawning Facility, and it is exactly what it sounds like. Now, this process began in 1969, and it's been a huge, huge success environmentally, economically, from a public relations standpoint. Every year, beginning in the first part of October, salmon return to these waters at Strawberry Creek. It's where they were raised as fingerlings, and the waters have been imprinted upon them, and this is where they return to after being out in the lakes for 3, 4, maybe 5 years. They return to tiny little Strawberry Creek. Now, salmon only spawn once and then they die. So all of the salmon that we're going to see here on this excursion, these fish are all but dead already. They swim to the headwaters of Strawberry Creek until they can swim no further. They're captured and put in holding tanks, a holding tank, I should say. There's an artificial current that is applied to the creek by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. What drives them to spawn is swimming upstream against a current. So the river is so low here and the water is so calm that there really is no moving current. So they produce a current. The salmon swim up and they get as far as they can. They jump over these weirs into a holding tank. And there they're held until the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, the WDNR, and also the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, 6 times during the month of October. They will process these fish, so twice a week for 3 weeks. It may look like this facility can't really produce much. It's pretty bare bones compared to some. We're just going to turn off up here, and it's going to be a bumpy ride. It's a gravel road. It's all washboard. So the reason Chinook salmon are in these Great Lakes waters at all began as an ecological experiment to help achieve a balanced and diverse predator-prey fish population. By the mid-1960s, scientists estimated that 85% of the entire population of fish in Lake Michigan were invasives. The primary culprit? Alewives, whose numbers exploded after gaining access to the Great Lakes through the Welland Canal. Alewives have no natural predators in the Great Lakes, so to control their exploding population, fish biologists selected Pacific salmon as a possible predator. And 65,000 Chinook salmon fingerlings, hatched from eggs harvested in Washington state, were released right here in Strawberry Creek. 3 years later, the mature adults returned, and so began the Wisconsin Chinook salmon spawning program. Since most Wisconsin tributary streams lack the potential to support sustainable natural reproduction, the salmon must be collected each year.
and spawned. Usurping the natural spawning process is a relatively low-tech affair, beginning with luring the salmon upstream by pumping Sturgeon Bay's fresh water about 3/4 of a mile overland to a concrete collection pond at the spawning facility. This serves multiple purposes. The water is aerated to provide plenty of oxygen to maintain fish health. It reduces stress and delays spawning. The spillway at the opposite end of the pool creates an artificial rapid, or fish ladder, for the salmon to swim up and into the pond before the water is returned back to the creek. It also provides the artificial current necessary downstream to instinctively drive the salmon forward.
The fish will come from that direction, and they'll swim up here and get trapped in the pond. This right here, it's essentially a little jumping pool where the fish can come in, they can rest, and then they'll jump up this little channel, which is essentially a fish ladder. So inside this concrete channel, we drop boards like this in, and we'll stack those boards up and essentially create a series of little waterfalls that the fish will jump up, and then eventually they'll get trapped in the pond.
This lazy backwater is not new to these giant 20-pound silver-sided salmon, now bruised and blackened from the stress of their journey. They were once introduced, held, fed, and released from here as fingerlings a few years earlier. They return not by memory, but by a suite of environmental, genetic, and metabolic cues that compel them to spawn in the birth waters imprinted upon them, thus fulfilling their natural life cycle. On the days when salmon are processed, a crowding gate is used to herd the weary but still feisty salmon to one end of the collection pond. A framed net is lowered and about a dozen or so salmon are hoisted up into a stainless steel workstation. The framed collection net is lowered into a tank of fresh water, infused with a stream of CO2 to anesthetize the fish so that they can be manually handled. It also minimizes stress during the release of the eggs from the females and sperm from the males, so as to maintain the highest degree of health possible. The salmon are then put through a knockout device and are generally unconscious throughout the entire process. The fish are weighed, measured, and inspected. A clipped fin distinguishes a stock fish from a wild salmon and also determines the year it was released. Technicians from the Wild Rose State Fish Hatchery are responsible for collecting eggs from the healthy, ripe females that are ready to lay. Compressed oxygen is inserted into her abdominal cavity through a needle, forcing out the fragile coppery-colored eggs without damaging them. Each female produces about 5,000 eggs. Eggs from several females are accumulated in a fertilization bucket, similar to a colander with holes at the bottom, and lowered into another bucket containing water brought in from the Wild Rose hatchery. The sperm, or milt as it's called, collected from several healthy males, is added and gently circulated among the eggs, ensuring diversity. After about 2 minutes, the 20,000 or so eggs are all fertilized and thoroughly rinsed.
Any of the excess, any blood, anything that looks bad in there, I'll try to get off there. Get them as clean as I can, and then I will transport them over there to a 1,000 part per million thiamine solution. The fish in Lake Michigan tend to be thiamine deficient because of their diet. we used to have something called early mortality syndrome, EMS.
The eggs are hardened over the course of the next 2 hours, then transferred to insulated containers for transport back to the Wild Rose hatchery.
The first 60 females every day, well, the first 60 females on the first 2 days, and then the first 30 every day after that, we will take ovarian fluid samples off of them, and then we run that for virology, so it's part of our health screening process.
The spawn is open to the public and is a popular educational field trip among the area middle schools, high school ecology classes, and senior continued learning programs.
At our stocking numbers today. And those size fish coming back didn't even happen within their native range. And so it was kind of an insight that we could do something special here.
So, what happens to the eggs of physically damaged or unhealthy females and those who are not ready to lay? Their eggs are collected and sold to a bait company for making spawn sacks, a popular bait among trout and salmon fishermen. Once processed, the fish are segregated into 2 groups. Those in the white bins are sold to a local company and converted to liquid fertilizer. As for the blue bins, they contain salmon less than 36 inches in length that are in good physical condition. They're donated to food pantries around the state and distributed to homeless shelters and others in need. Nothing goes to waste. Operational costs for the spawning program come directly from the purchase of an annual salmon stamp on a Wisconsin fishing license, and by donations from sportsmen's clubs. The Wisconsin Chinook Salmon Spawning Program continues to flourish as an environmental, economic, and public relations success, landing a decisive counterpunch to a century's worth of overfishing, pollution, and competition from invasive species, factors that have decimated native populations in our beloved waters, and giving rise to a $7 billion Great Lakes sport fishing industry, as well as a major contributor to the economic vitality of the Door Peninsula. Were it not for the implementation of and dedication to programs like this, prized non-native salmonids like Chinook and coho, as well as steelhead and brown trout, would not be possible or even sustainable, and would ultimately lead to immeasurable economic and environmental decline. The depth and reach the little Door County tributary of Strawberry Creek has on the broader environment and the economy far exceeds that of its inconspicuous notation on a map, making this a mighty water indeed.
It's been a few days since they closed down. They're starting to put things away. You can see that they're opening the sluice gate here from the concrete pond, letting the water back out into Strawberry Creek, down into the canal, and out to Lake Michigan and Sturgeon Bay. The pumps have been turned off. They're no longer pumping water up here. And there are a few spawning salmon left, but looking for a place to do their thing. They'll be taken back now to Wild Rose. Well, they'll incubate, hatch. The fry will be transferred into other holding tanks there at the facility, and then eventually into raceways when they get to be about 4 or 5 inches long. And then come April, end of April, beginning of May, they'll be brought back here and released back into the pond, held for a couple of weeks so they can acclimate to the water, imprint these waters upon themselves, and then they'll be released in 2, 3, 4 years, maybe even 5 years. They'll come back here to spawn once they mature. Now, not all will be released here. The rest will be distributed to other rivers around the state of Wisconsin, about a dozen rivers, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty quiet here now, pretty gloomy. Fall is about over. We had some beautiful color, just outstanding color this year. But we had high winds and rains for the past several days, which brought the creek level up and all the leaves down. So I hope you enjoyed this little adventure, the Strawberry Creek Chinook salmon spawning facility. And yeah, I appreciate you joining me. If you like the content, please give a thumbs up on the like button down below there, and consider subscribing if you're not already a subscriber. It really helps get this video out in front of more viewers. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and I will just see you down the road. Thanks for watching.